It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. It is great to have you all here. Also, you listening on the RealAg Radio podcast. Also appreciate that as well. Well, it's Friday, which means we've got the RealAg Issues Panel, and I'm looking forward to it. We got Cherilyn Jolly Nagel, farmer from Mossbank, Saskatchewan, will be on today's program, as well as Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture. We got a lot of topics to cover. We got Doug Ford and a real scandal as it applies to how the green belt is handled. We got some economic news out of the U.S. and interest rates, what happens next. We got oil at $83. We're going to talk about some of the drought issues and how the drought in Western Canada is really creating some problems for, like, ag tech is an example, right? And from a sale perspective. So there's lots of stuff to chat about here this week on the program. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms. Or the other option is to call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Had an audience member ask me, you mentioned this fire hose feed, and I nickname it this. So this is the Real Agriculture podcast. So you get this radio show, plus you get all the other stuff that we do on a regular daily basis. That is called Real Agriculture Podcasts. Okay, so search that on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll see everything from this show to individual interviews or schools, a whole lot more. Okay, so check that out. Indeed, and if you have any questions, just send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Registration is now open for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference coming August 15th to 17th to Calgary, Alberta, brought to you by McDonald's. Spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, and take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos and experience bullfighting at the closing party. Proud, innovative, and loyal, we are beef. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up-to-date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Introducing the Arion 600 Series tractor by Kloss, where versatility meets productivity head-on, because you've got jobs to do. Mowing, tedding, raking, baling, loading, filling, tilling, cleaning, spreading, hauling, feeding. This is multi-purpose reimagined to do the work for you. It's more than just power. The Arion 600 tractor gets it done.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Let's get into the RealAg Issues Panel, brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Make sure you go to borax.com. Let's bring in the panel. We got lots to discuss today in the program. You should see the show sheet. It is long with lots of points, and I'm looking forward to getting the panel's opinion on all of this. Up first, Lyndsey Smith coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you doing?
Heads above water, tell you that much. Which is not the same for a lot of us here in the Ottawa region.
Won't stop raining out that way.
No, Ottawa, like the actual city, had a flash flood yesterday, everybody. So there you go. It's officially that.
Yeah, we heard about that Well, just the amount of moisture from Paul Hermans, who was on the show yesterday, and he talked about it. We talked about how if we could just like take some of that moisture like Quebec's been getting and pay it back to the West, it would be really awesome.
It really would. We'll work on that.
Also joining us is Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Hey, Kelvin, how are you?
Doing well here. Does it work that way? Can we exchange transfer payments for rain?
Well, we should get something back.
It's a new great idea.
We take moisture.
Here in Manitoba, we take the transfer payments and we also take the rain. We enjoy the rain too because we got some rain this week. I think it brought us from around 25 to 35% of normal for the growing season so far.
Ouch. Wait, hey, when does harvest start?
It has in early cereals around here on our farm. We're probably looking at next week sometime if as long as it's not raining.
Yeah,
it's just late. The moisture's coming now, or it seems to be coming now, but it's it wasn't. It'll be good for the soybeans and the corn finishing off, but the cereal crops definitely have suffered.
Yeah. Also joining us, it's been a while, and I've been trying to get her on the show here for quite some time, and she has conveniently avoided me, came up with excuses. Like, I think one week it was like, oh, I'm houseboating. Oh, big deal. It is Cherilyn Jolly Nagel, farmer from Mossbank, Saskatchewan. Cherilyn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shaun. That was a fantastic trip, by the way, and I had no cell phone service, and it was quite nice. It was quite nice to be at a houseboat with no cell phone service. My kids were a little bit distraught, but they got over it.
Like, oh my God, how am I going to keep my streaks alive on Snapchat?
Yes, it was exactly that. They had to yell across from houseboat to houseboat at other people instead of finding them on Snap Maps. Yeah, it was new to them.
Oh, the struggle is real. Hey, how are the crops out there in Mossbank?
They're okay. You know, I don't have anything good to write home about. We're just in our early seeded durum. There has been some lentils harvested in the area that were seeded first. I'm hearing rumors of them as also okay. Quality is good. I haven't heard any issues around quality. Even the durum is weighing up. So we're feeling good about quality, but it's so dry. It is so dry. As of last night, we got a little bit more. You know, you always get a little bit of a rain during harvest. So we got a 1/2 inch last night and a 1/10 the night before. That won't stop us because it's super windy and it's bright and sunny. So we will be harvesting again shortly after lunch. But yeah, it is very, very dry. And that certainly, sucked the life out of some of the yields.
Yeah, and this is kind of the trouble with averages, and how we're reminded how important the timing of that precip is. When we are like Kelvin said, like 25% of normal precip during the growing season, we are extremely fearful that we get back to the average during the time we don't need the rain, which is fall. During harvest. Yeah. Post-harvest, rain away. But during harvest... Go ahead.
Honestly, Shaun, if you actually had tracked me down, if you had enticed me enough to come on the show at seeding, I would have told you that things were fantastic. We had such great moisture and the crop just came up absolutely beautiful. A wonderful start on all fronts, canola, lentils, durum, everything looked great coming out of the ground. And it just had all the vigor you needed and then just petered out. Just absolutely nothing after that. So, the law of averages is just so hard to track. It's so hard to learn from lessons like this. If you're trying to do some plots or you're trying to do some new field testing out there, it's become just so hard to do in-field testing because we just can't seem to get an average year.
I think here we're destined for an early fall. I have really noticed in the last 7 to 10 days that nighttime you're sitting out on the deck, it just has that sort of fall feel to it. I'm a little bit worried about that. Kelvin, go ahead.
I was just going to say what Cherilyn's saying also jives with what we've been seeing in the Saskatchewan crop reports going back early in the growing season. We talked about how Saskatchewan actually had good moisture. I forget what the number was. It was something like 80% in the 80s of the province had adequate moisture in the provincial crop report. And this week, it's down to 12% adequate moisture in cropland and 10% of hay and pasture land in Saskatchewan having adequate moisture. So certainly things have gone less than ideal on the precipitation side of things this year.
Yeah. Now, Lyndsey,
so we're at 150% grasshoppers, and I made up that number.
Yeah,
or
Probably
two,
higher.
or
probably
200.
higher.
I brought quite a significant population home with me after Egg in Motion on the front of my grill of my Jeep. Lyndsey, I've been hearing record corn yields potentially for southwestern Ontario, but everybody throws in concern about Quebec because of all the moisture. What have you been hearing anything from growers there in terms of just how poor it potentially could be?
Shaun, are you insinuating that I live in Western Quebec? Because
yes.
I kind of do. Yeah, you're right. So I am in the far east, as we call it, and I can see Quebec. So it is true that overall, this just incessant moisture, which is painful to say. I'm sorry, Cherilyn, but there's some pretty high stress on soybeans for sure, on the root rot side, on the white mold side, which I know everyone says, well, if you have white mold, it means you have good beans. There's always a limit, of course. We definitely, the corn looks pretty good overall. Definitely struggling to get hay done across the board. I know that here and into Quebec, but around this area, there was so much hay that was put up last year, and thank goodness there was, because I don't know anyone beyond maybe that quick stint in May where it was dry. I don't know anyone that's had hay go to plan at this point. Obviously, for dairy producers, us as well with sheep, cattle, the health issues. So on the livestock side, the level of pneumonia, foot issues, all those sorts of things that come with really hot, muggy, and humid conditions. We're dealing with fly strike this week, which is disgusting. I hope no one ever has to deal with it.
Don't Google that with images. Do not. I warn the audience. Do not Google images of fly strike.
You are welcome, everyone listening right now who knows what fly strike is. I made Shaun, the non-livestock person, Google fly strike.
You
It's
didn't
horrible.
warn
it's terrible.
me.
I know I didn't. It's great. That's the element of surprise, Shaun, is really important on this one.
I will get you back. I will get you back.
I'm sure that you will.
Kelvin, we had an election in Saskatchewan, a by-election. And one of the things that happened, and I know this is going to get Cherilyn really going, NDP fared pretty well.
Yeah, we saw a by-election in 3 ridings in Saskatchewan last night, and the NDP actually won 2 of them previously held by the Sask Party. And Sask Party won the 3rd. That was former Provincial Ag Minister Lyle Stewart's riding. But one thing of note in that riding is that this new Saskatchewan United Party got over 20% of the votes. So I'm curious what Cherilyn's thoughts are on the overall results of it, but also the rise of this United Party. Is this Saskatchewan's version of the Wild Rose in Alberta? Are we seeing the right splintering potentially, or what does this mean? I know by-elections, we always read way too much into by-elections as well versus general elections. So I don't know, Cherilyn, what are your thoughts on what happened yesterday?
Well, I did what most political junkies who are feeling alone in a cab or in a field do during, political events like by-election, and I started text messaging everybody that was also a political junkie. And I was a bit surprised at the lack of surprise, to be honest. I was surprised that that Sask Party lost 2 seats in Regina, and I was surprised at the Sask United Party's, 22 or 23% increase in Lumsden Morse, but nobody else was surprised. So I guess I am a little bit out of the loop, or maybe just more optimistic than everybody else. And I do wonder exactly what you said, Kelvin, if we aren't in a position where we're going to start to split that vote. And I wish I had some answers as to how to, better bring in those folks that are feeling so left out that they wanted to start a new party. So yeah, I guess I'm a watching at the moment, and I was surprised.
Former Ag Minister Jerry Ritz, a big part of that Saskatchewan United Party. Cherilyn, what is the issue that is driving people to? Do you know that?
Well, originally it was COVID. That was what was driving this. They did not like it was kind of the anti-freedom in general that I felt was a bit mixed with federal issues. And maybe the Sask Party not supporting Saskatchewan people enough. Although I thought some of the the white paper that came out, the Sask First Act, all of those things that were coming out were indicators that Saskatchewan was primed for supporting its local people, and they were going to do what it takes to do that. But I originally thought it was all stemming from COVID, anti-vaccinations, don't tell me what to do type scenarios. But without that here in the mix anymore, there's education has certainly become a high priority or high topic of conversation. What do we do about education systems that we don't like? A lot of that has been in the news lately.
I was just going to say, I think the electorate often uses by-elections to punish governments. Everybody knew going into the by-elections yesterday there wasn't going to be a change in government. So in terms of who's motivated to turn out and that type of thing, it's often used to send it. There's maybe been an exception at the federal level lately with some of the by-elections federally, but often I think by-elections would be used to kind of punish the existing party in power, and that may have been the case yesterday as well.
Okay, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more of the RealAg Issues Panel. We got Cherilyn Jolly Nagel of Mossbank, Saskatchewan, Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture. We'll be back right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Hope you got some big weekend plans. I'm sure some of you will be harvesting. All the best to you, and stay safe out there, everybody. This segment's brought to you by Co-op Fuels. Power through harvest with Co-op Fuels and lubricants made for the longest days and the biggest equipment. Performance you can rely on. Go to fuel.crs to find out more. And if you've been paying attention, fuel prices have been kind of going up here lately. Diesel for sure, and probably a lot of that oil at $83. So some of this inflationary cycle may not exactly be over at this point. Okay, let's dive in here. Our RealAg Issues Panel, Cherilyn Jolly Nagel of Mossbank, Saskatchewan, and Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture joining me today on the panel. Not a great week for Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The Auditor General report came out. Lyndsey, I guess, what's your reaction to what some are describing as a pretty significant scandal for Mr. Ford?
Oh gosh. Okay, where do we begin? There is a major ick factor in all of this. Obviously, there's a few different angles to this. I think for those who haven't followed along, last fall, Premier Doug Ford basically pushed through a deal or an idea to redraw boundaries of Toronto's greenbelt. So Ottawa also has a greenbelt. These are protected areas. Agriculture happens in them. There's parks. There's all sorts of stuff. Anyway. Greenbelts themselves are somewhat problematic, but anyway, he redrew Toronto's greenbelt boundaries to, in his words and in the province's words, to solve part of the housing crisis. We need land to build houses on. The greenbelt's right there by all these amenities. So don't worry, we're going to develop these acres, but we'll set aside other acres in other places to balance this off. The problem is, of course, a lot of these acres, they are very close to Toronto, and they are some of the best farmland in Canada, hands down. They've got, and not just because of the soil, but because of the climate at which you can grow crops. So this is very valuable land as far as agriculture production goes. A lot of what's included in the Greenbelt, we have protected areas and habitat, and let's face it, habitat's in pretty short supply in the Greater Toronto Area. Anyway, the whole thing when it was happening really there was so much controversy over why this even had to happen. Did it need to happen? And the Auditor General basically confirmed what most people were concerned about, and that was that the due process did not happen. Ford basically jumped the queue on having to do any sort of environmental or agriculture assessments. And of all the land that's going out, only, I think, I have to double check. I think it's only 4 developers. It might be 3. A handful of developers, it's 3. A handful of developers actually were successful in securing this land, and they also jumped the queue. There was no due process. So there's the farmland angle of losing farmland, habitat, all that sort of stuff. Then there's the ick factor of, the speculation that it's just Ford's buddies that managed to get their hands on this land and are set to make billions. And then there's the other part where Ford and his government, so there's a couple other people in this that we can talk about, agriculture included, supported this plan to say, don't worry, we're going to set aside land elsewhere. Well, the land that's set aside elsewhere is not necessarily agriculture land. So yes, there was more habitat, let's say, set aside, etc., but we still lost farmland and will continue to. And this province is not one that has a lot of extra, at least in the very productive area of Southern Ontario. So really icky is my assessment.
So that is a good description. I'm just trying to sort out where the shock is that politics, right? And we can make Ford jokes; those are easy. But politics is extremely icky. I guess I'm just not surprised with what kind of happened here. Kelvin, do you think it's going to impact him politically?
Yes, I do. I think it will, especially outside of the cities of Ontario. I know that's not where the vote gets determined, but I think in some ways this is on brand for Doug Ford in terms of, we have a housing problem, let's solve it. What's the quickest way to solve it? Let's make more land available. From a very simplistic perspective, I think that, and that's the narrative that the provincial government seems to be running with and doubling down on here since this Auditor General report came out this week. But yeah, I do think it kind of feeds the narrative that Ford is deeply into the cronyism and that type of stuff, that the ick factor. Lyndsey didn't maybe use as strong words as what some other people are using to describe it, but I think it feeds that narrative, and there's a lot of smoke. There might not be clear fire here, as a lot of this is being blamed on minister's staffer, and who was communicating. And I think what maybe the shock this week, or the new information this week, Shaun, was how direct the communications were between the developers and the minister's office, and this particular staffer in the minister's office, how direct those communications and how the developers were essentially involved in some of the decision making here and informing the decisions. And I don't like how in politics over the last number of years, we've seen a lot of examples federally, when there's a scandal, staffers get blamed and get called before committees. The buck should stop with the elected official, with the minister, with the premier. There should be some elected accountability for elected officials. And this seems to be moving towards another example where, when there's a scandal that breaks, a staffer takes the fall, and that's not how it should be.
Cherilyn, doesn't this all come back to sort of the root of the problem, which is so much of somebody having a political future has to do with fundraising, and in order to repay for the fundraising, there's back scratching that happens, and it can be incredibly brutally. Lyndsey says icky, unethical, immoral would be another one, unfair. There's a lot of different ways to describe it, but this is kind of what's creating this political situation right now.
I admit that I love watching the game of politics. I love watching shows about politics. I love tuning in to see how the political game is played and who's good at it, who's not good at it. So this definitely just falls into that stereotypical, I hate politics because of this type of thing. So there's that piece of it. I guess what I'm missing, the gap in the story for me, is about the land and what was it expropriated from the farmers? What was the farmers' perspective in all of this? If we just, this is political cronies, scratch your back, I'll scratch mine. That's a whole piece of the puzzle. But as a farmer, I want to know what really happened when it came to the land. Did those farmers get an opportunity to sell their land at a really high price? And then I can just, clap for them and say, good job, I guess, if you were ready to let it go. But I can't help but see similarities to what happened in the Netherlands, where you have a government that is choosing a new priority. Well, I got all up in arms about what was happening and farmers were getting expropriated and basically bought out, you're not allowed to farm anymore. And I go crazy about that kind of stuff. But the reality is their government was choosing housing for an increasing in population over agricultural export. They just see it as a better priority for them. So I wonder, is that a true piece of this puzzle? Does Ontario actually need this for housing? This is an actual problem, and they could just admit that this is a bigger priority for them than agricultural land. And where's the farmer story here? What happened there? Can you guys fill in that gap?
Well, Lyndsey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Auditor General said, like, in terms of this fixing any sort of housing situation, even internal documents in the government showed that it wasn't going to address that problem at all.
That's right. So Cherilyn, they're great points and they're great questions. And so we can answer at least part of it. And one of them was essentially exactly that the land that will be developed, it will be developed. There will be houses that go on it and people will buy them. We're not saying that there isn't demand necessarily for housing or that people won't buy them. It's that, the government's own documents show that they could meet their targets for housing without taking these particular pieces of land out of the greenbelt, meaning that these are more attractive pieces of land. They're usually up against, growing cities and these sorts of things. So there's, but the land or the space to make the housing requirement exists elsewhere. They could meet their targets without taking this out. But to Kelvin's point, this is probably a lot faster. So, and there's some developers that, are ready to rock and roll and that was actually part of the rule here, and what part of Ontario's larger strategy is that any developers that are taking on some of these projects have to actually have houses up by a certain date. So there is, certainly overall, or from the outside looking in, there's an urgency to this, and that seems to be the strategy, and that's what they're pushing forward. But realistically, from the fact side, this land didn't have to be put into this development. The need could be met some other way. As far as the farmer's perspective, it's a really good one, Cherilyn. And the Greenbelt, as I mentioned at the outset, and we don't have enough time in this show, but it's something to dig into. The Greenbelt itself and the farmers that are within it, it is often sort of problematic in some ways, in that a lot of the farmers don't have, a lot of them are on leases. A lot of the land is held, and because it's in the Greenbelt and can't be developed, they don't necessarily have the opportunity to do long-term like investment in the land. It happens here in Ottawa as well. We have a lot of farms in our Greenbelt that are actually owned by the National Capital Commission. So it's a commission that owns the land and leases it to farmers. So the Greenbelts are not simple. And yes, there are people that own land within them, but it is a very complex system. And a lot of the farmers, though, we do know, at least from past conversations, want to continue farming there for sure. They wanted improvements as far as being able to, have longer leases, those sorts of things, but most wanted to stay. And so,
Lyndsey, I think from agriculture's perspective, and I got a column about this at RealAgriculture.com, is I think from the agriculture standpoint, we're littered with hypocrisy in regards to how we feel about urban sprawl. Some of the people have been sending me emails about this topic, and how could we continue to lose farmland to housing developments? Like you're either all in that camp or you're all out of that camp, because what's the solution? We prevent the city of Toronto from expanding and say that, no, you got to relocate or, set up you're like a Hutterite colony that's going to split and move to Northern Ontario. Like it's unfeasible here.
So, and I guess the point here is are farmers in the food production business or in the real estate business, right?
Well, we've sort of totally had this conversation
before. Right. Well, given a long enough timeline, yes. Right. And that's included in your op-ed that, realistically, for many farmers, their retirement plan will be to sell land, likely. And depending on where you farm right now, anyway, that very well may be to developers. I mean, I live within Ottawa city limits, and right now, it's it's now maybe a 15-minute drive to the first development. When even just 7 years ago, it was more like 20. So, in 20 years from now, will I be surrounded by developments? Quite possibly. And does that make, how do I how do I make that decision then to keep this 100 acres, or, would it be viable for my kids to farm it in 20 years from now if that's what I'm up against? It's a huge question.
Well, what typically happens is, because development money is way more than what a farmer's willing to pay, what ends up happening is that encroachment happens as the farmer sells, gets, essentially wins the lottery, and goes farm somewhere else. And so, but I'm not saying that's a great reality, but that definitely is the reality at hand. Hey, we got to take a break. Oh, we got to get through some topics here. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this. It's now time for a product spotlight with Koch Agronomic Services, and right now we're joined by Tom Barry, based out of Saskatchewan. What is the high cost of some low-rate stabilizers?
Well, not all nitrogen stabilizers have the same or even comparable rates of active ingredients in them. And so our products in particular, if you compare Super U on the market, Super U has over 9,000 parts per million of active ingredient. That's broken apart between 8,500 parts per million of dicyandiamide and then over 600 parts per million of NBPT, which is agritine. So, those rates, when we compare that to the market, there's a lot of products on the market right now that don't even have, 1,500 parts per million of combined. And that would be on the high side, Shaun. The highest products barely have 1,500 parts per million of total.
That's a significant difference for sure. DefendYourN.ca, right? Also, they could talk to their local retailer?
Yeah.
Hey, great stuff. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, RealAg Issues Panel. We got Cherilyn Jolly Nagel of Mossbank, Saskatchewan, along with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture. WASD today, USDA pegs. This is a tweet from Arlen Suderman of StoneX. USDA pegs the corn yield at 175.1 bushels per acre, with soybeans at 50.9, below the trade at 175.5 and 51.3 respectively. So, I don't know, kind of a, I saw another person tweet that all of that anticipation for a 175, eh? Okay, well, seems, that's going to be kind of a mid-range for some people for sure. And the markets right after the report came out, kind of ho-hum, almost exactly on corn for sure, trading at where they were pre-report. So we'll definitely be following that as we get to next week on the Wednesday show when we talk to another market analyst for sure. And stay tuned for coverage of the report and analysis at RealAgriculture.com. Okay, we've been talking the last couple of weeks about the MacAulay 2.0. Lawrence MacAulay is back as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. We're going to at some point see some mandate letters for all the ministers. My question to you, panel, is what would we like to see in the mandate letter for Lawrence MacAulay? Kelvin, what's something that comes to mind for you?
Well, I started making a list, and I'm at 10 different things so far, and there's still a lot more that I haven't written down, so I'm not sure where to begin. Well, we've covered a few of these, and there's one that I'm not going to say I want on there, but it's been on every mandate letter that I've covered, and going back at least 2 decades, the Canada Grain Act modernization. I'm assuming that'll be on there just because it's default on every agriculture minister's mandate letter, and it's something that hasn't been dealt with since Minister MacAulay was in the agriculture minister's office. So that one is just it has to take a spot. Just even if I know people want to see action on it, but just by default because it's always there. It's one of those constant things that doesn't go away. It seems. I would like to see him provide clarity on the sustainable ag strategy, the green agriculture plan that was announced late last year, what it's actually going to look like and what it's actually going to mean. And is it going to be like, is it just watered down opportunity for the government to say they've consulted and not actually listen to what the committee that's been formed, the stakeholders that have been brought to the table, what they're saying. And as part of that, the fertilizer emissions reduction target has been kind of quietly shuffled under the umbrella of the sustainable ag strategy. So what the future is on those two big files.
Okay. Cherilyn, what would be top of mind for you that you would like to either see on the mandate letter or not in the mandate letter?
I would like you to delete from the show that Kelvin mentioned fertilizer reduction emissions, because I haven't heard that talked about for a long time, and I was hoping that it would just go away, but some people just keep bringing it up.
Kelvin,
Thanks,
jeepers.
Kelvin.
Way to go.
I will say I was glad to see Lawrence Macaulay come back into this position for the sole reason that we don't have to hear the words, I need to learn more about that. Every time we get a new minister, like the mandate letter just includes learn more about this and learn more about that and get up to speed on this. Lawrence Macaulay should be able to step back into this role and just get going. There should be no, getting up to speed. So I was running through the list that Kelvin had come up with. Just lots of the same old things. The Canada Grain Act, same old thing. Loading in the rain. I thought this one was interesting because I was listening to, I don't get to listen to RealAg in real time. It's going back to previous episodes. And I was listening to the interview that you did, Kelvin, with David Shadnovic from CN Rail. And he was unequivocal in the conversation around loading vessels in the rain, that is a commercial decision. And I sat there thinking about that for the longest time, because I personally have been just going crazy that we still live in a time where, and in my opinion, it was the unions that would not load in the rain. So I had to do a little bit more digging, listen to that interview, and try to wrap my head around that commercial piece of it, and that there are things in place that allow for those vessels to be loaded in the rain. It becomes a commercial decision for the grain companies to choose whether or not they want to pay the extra money for the equipment and the employees and stuff. But that was a good lesson for me, that what I used to think about an old issue has changed in the last couple of years.
Lyndsey, how about you?
Well, I'm all about photo ops. So definitely wanted someone listed in the notes going for ice cream again. Remember they going for ice cream with his BFF?
I don't think
Tom Vilsack.
I don't think Tom Vilsack's going
Who's
for
more
ice cream.
photogenic than Lawrence Macaulay?
Right. Going for ice cream.
Trudeau.
Yeah, camo.
You went for ice cream with
Sonny Perdue.
Sonny Perdue. That's what it was. Yeah,
under the Trump administration, but
that's right. Yeah,
let's redo that with
let's redo it. I like it. So yeah, so trade for me is where, so agreeing wholeheartedly with Kelvin's point, Cherilyn's point, but the trade, and I know, Shaun, it's your favorite, Canada needs a trade czar. We need someone who actually holds these trade deals up and says, country X, we need to make this actually happen to go both ways, not just one way. That's not really trading. So I would like to see that sort of bump up and actually, take a stand on some of these things and get some of that through. Sort of in line with the loading in the rain, labor in general, as far as labor woes. So we are talking about, we just got through this port strike. The railways, of course, have an ongoing issue. So what are we doing sort of overall with strengthening our supply chains and the resiliency of them? I know we hate that word, but this idea that, it feels like we're just constantly putting out the next labor fire. We're not actually sort of figuring out how do we create a system that isn't going to grind to a halt every 6 months over a new issue. So I would really like to see some leadership on that, and seeing Bill C-234 through. I think a lot of people.
That's the one on the carbon tax on grain.
That's
drying.
the carbon tax on barn heating and grain drying. Yeah, see it through. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to see, because it feels, as long as we've been talking about the Grain Act review, it feels like seed regulatory modernization has been about the same length. I would like to see that wrapped up and concluded. I also, I think is an important part of this, I wish there would be more clarity from AAFC in terms of what their future is in plant breeding, period, because I think there's a long history here of telling farm groups and telling the industry what they want to hear, two different things, and it's created a lot of confusion, and it's actually created at times real angst between stakeholders and friction between the stakeholders. So I think there is that for sure. I agree with Kelvin's point about the sustainable ag strategy. That needs, they've invited 22 groups, I believe the total number is 2. They're getting a wide variety of opinions, and it could be a positive, but let's try to take into consideration all of the stakeholders and not just one or two participants in that. I think there's kind of an opportunity here for Minister MacAulay to sort of set the stage here in terms of where agriculture fits in this whole totem pole of ministries. The question is whether or not he's given the rope to do that, or if this is basically, like Kelvin had alluded to a couple weeks ago, this is more an ambassador position. There's falling political opinion of the Liberals, and I'm not saying they're going to gain a lot of votes in farm country, but they do represent all citizens, and there's some work for MacAulay to do here if he chooses to push forward on it for sure. If you have any suggestions, go ahead.
I was thinking, Shaun, that when they do a cabinet shuffle like this, it's a good opportunity for all of us to take a step back and remind ourselves that there's a question out there, and that's what is the role of government? So when you ask for a mandate letter, before you start doing this wish list, ask yourself first, what is actually the role of government? Because I've heard a lot of people throwing out ideas of what, Lawrence MacAulay should get to, what he should get back to. And a lot of them, in my opinion, don't land in the role of the role of government. And for me, I agree with you on the trade file. Number one role of government in agriculture for an export nation like Canada is to keep those trade relationships running. I can't believe we're in a position to think about the renewal of the USMCA already. I'm still in shock that we had to go through are we going to have a NAFTA? So I have to wrap my head around the renewal of USMCA already, and the trepidation that I'm going to have once that comes around too. But that's, to me, the role of government is opening up and maintaining trade relations for Canada. Yeah,
here. Okay, let's take a break. I should say this. If you have any suggestions what you want to see in Minister MacAulay's mandate letter, I'm sure horse slaughter is going to be in there as well. But if you've got others, make sure you send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. We've got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. We got Cherilyn Jolly Nagel of Mossbank, Saskatchewan, Lyndsey Smith, and Kelvin Heppner of RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com. Hey, let me tell you about Defend Your N. You got to defend your N. It sounds like a really good thing to go about in life. DefendYourN.ca, low-rate MBPT solutions claim to protect nitrogen, but no imitator product delivers like Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, the next-gen urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. See how others stack up to the proven power of Anvil at DefendYourN.ca. Okay, we're continuing the conversation here on RealAg Radio. Now, some tough times in some of the sectors that worked, either up value chain or down value chain from farmers. And one of those sectors that appears to be in a little bit of a struggle here right now is the area of ag tech. Now, I'm not talking about the venture capital side. We're talking about the actual business operation side. Kelvin, we've got a couple of recent announcements that do take in ag tech and cutbacks. Farmers Edge, big cutback in staff. And we've also got TELUS Ag, where they've cut TELUS has cut 6,000 jobs. Some of those are in their agriculture area. What do you make of that?
You mentioned venture capital. I do think that we have seen maybe a bit of, I'm not sure if it was a bubble, but certainly that hype from 3 to 5 years ago with large amounts of money being put into, from outside of agriculture, being put into companies like Farmers Edge and TELUS Agriculture and many others. We saw hundreds of millions of dollars flow into these futuristic tech solutions and the future of food security being determined by these companies and that type of thing. And I think some of the bloom has faded there in terms of cash flow becoming reality, and so that's where Farmers Edge has shut down some operations. They've pulled out of some countries internationally, definitely scaled back what they're doing even here at home in Western Canada, pulling back and some farm customers receiving remote support now, it sounds like, that type of thing. TELUS as well, you mentioned the job cuts. We haven't been able to determine how many are on the agriculture side of things, but likely some affected there too. And of course, at the same time, we have capital just in general throughout the economy tightening up and interest rates rising, higher costs of borrowing, all those types of factors impacting this as well.
Yeah. I talked to one of those employees of Farmers Edge that was laid off, and he was providing support to farmers on, say, like the integration with the monitor and all that kind of stuff. And he had said that the call center is going to be in India, which that to me presents a whole different side of barriers of support and things like that. Definitely a cost cutting for sure. Now, Cherilyn, I don't care whether you're selling fungicide or selling new software. From a Western Canadian perspective, the drought is a part of this.
Absolutely, it's a part of it. Profitability is a part of this. Every farmer wants to be excited about new innovation, but we're going on 7 years of drought, and what that does is more clearly draw a line through the middle between what do we need as basics and what do we consider a wish list, new innovation, would love to try that. And right now, the basics are astronomically expensive. It just your basics is your equipment, and equipment prices are really high right now. You're looking at $1 million for a combine, and the combine is not bringing you new innovation, right? You're getting maybe increased capacity. It's something like that. It'll look, comfy seats, comfy all of that, but we're not getting new combines with incredibly new innovation. So that $1 million isn't buying you something new. It's buying you a basic machine that you've used every year on your farm for generations. So equipment costs very expensive. Land prices always going up. I have not heard of land prices going down for many, many years now. So land prices, if you're trying to expand, going up. Interest rates going up. Fungicides, all of our crop protection products going up. Fertilizer, fuel. We talked about fuel right at the start of the show. Fuel is going up. So all of the basics that farmers have to buy, all of those prices are up. So there's just nothing left. So if there's nothing left for us to experiment in that ag tech innovation column, it's less exciting for us. I attended the farm shows. I was working at Canada's Farm Show in Regina, so I got to be there and walk around and see the new innovations. But I wish I was more excited about it. Unless it's going to give me our farm a return on the investment immediately, we're just bypassing it right now. And that's disappointing, because I don't want to send a message to science, research, innovation, ag tech companies that agriculture doesn't want you. We want you. We just can't afford it right now. And there's the whole piece of the investment piece, the ag tech summits, the funds that are going into it. But then there's the piece of the puzzle that is the farmer. Right now, for the most part, the farmer can't afford it.
Here's what's interesting. Cherilyn mentions machinery, and Lyndsey, what we're seeing, if you look at the Association of Equipment Manufacturers report, their flash report for ag tractors and combines up until the end of July, the Canadian numbers, We've got four-wheel tractors for this year up 21%, total tractors down 15%, and combines up 48% over a year-to-date a year ago. Even though the July numbers were negative, but year-to-date, still very positive. So in Canada, someone's buying those machines.
Well, okay, it's up 48%, but how many actual units is that? Because on the grand scheme of things. Now, we also have to look at this also in the case of, some of these upgrades you do when you can afford to. And for some in Canada anyway, they had a good crop with good prices. So there's certainly instances where there has been in, let's say, the last year, I'm thinking about Ontario, there's been some profitability to be had. But I think, along this line of innovation, upgrades, trying new things, to Sherilyn's point, innovation is quite simply, it's a solution to a problem, a new solution to an existing problem, right? It has to solve something for you. And to quote Mr. Jim Hale, whenever we talk about these things, can you make it rain? And ultimately, if you can't offer a solution to it not raining, farmers, just as much as they might want to buy something, they can't. So yes, we use, equipment manufacturing numbers or equipment sale numbers as a proxy of, how healthy the balance sheet is, whatever. I think that realistically, yes, we've had areas that have been quite profitable in the last little while, but that doesn't, that a 48% increase sounds big, but how many actual units?
So as of the end of July in Canada, that's 1,073 machines for the 48% increase. In the U.S., it's a 41% increase year to date to the end of July, and that's 4,028 machines.
Can I just jump in here, Shaun?
Of course.
2 comments. I think those AEM numbers tell there's some things you can read into it, because they also break down the tractor size by horsepower, and that's where you can see the smaller tractors, the lower horsepower tractor sales have really declined. And I think that reflects, of course, what we saw during COVID when there were massive sales. Everybody with an acreage or a hobby farm was upgrading their getting a small front end loader tractor to do their chores with, kind of thing. And I think a lot of the smaller tractor sales numbers, those have really pulled back. But on the agriculture side of things, and going back to Sherilyn's comments about what's essential and what's not essential, a combine and a four-wheel drive tractor are pretty essential on most grain farms these days. And that's why we have seen decent crop prices and some decent returns. And that's why I think those sales numbers are strong. And the companies, the manufacturers' quarterly earnings reports would also underline this. We've seen AGCO and CNH and other companies post some really strong numbers. And some of that's also based on not only increased units being sold, but increased prices as well, in terms of pushing prices higher.
And also the used market's been so strong. Some of this could be too, I'm going to pay that much for used, I might as well buy new, right? If I can get it.
Yeah. And there's also the repairs and maintenance numbers too that are never included in that. So once you upgrade to newer equipment, your repairs and maintenance number goes down. But you have to combine all the repairs and maintenance numbers and your new equipment numbers to get a farm equipment number. And that's just going to vary every year. As people buy new, the repairs and maintenance, generally speaking, will go down. As you're buying used or maintaining your used equipment, those numbers are going up. But it's all in the category of machinery and equipment.
Yeah. Unless on our farm, we don't count our own time, Sherilyn.
No,
Kelvin.
Honestly, lately it's John Deere technicians coming out trying to fix what we can't. So we have to include that time.
That adds up quickly. You're right.
Hey, team, we are out of time. Sherilyn, have yourself a great weekend.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the call.
Lyndsey, you as well.
You too.
And Kelvin, all the best.
Thanks, everyone else. Take care.
Okay. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or, of course, you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.